Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of the video Nasties, our look at movies that were banned in England in the early 1980s due to a moral panic over content on VHS tapes. We previously covered a couple movies from esteemed filmmakers, as well as a beloved American slasher movie from the golden age of that genre. Really, so far we've been wading in the kiddie pool. Today we're going to go a bit further out, a real video Nasties deep cut. This is Renee Harmon's bizarro masterpiece, Frozen Scream. This is pure, undiluted American homemade horror cinema. It's actually closely related to another nasty, Don't Go in the Woods, as we'll see a little bit later. The tape in question was released by a little company called Home Video Productions and distributed by Intervision, who themselves put out a number of horror titles on videotape, including some pretty big name stuff like Carrie and Dawn of the Dead. Frozen Scream found its way on the official Nasties list in August 1984 and was dropped in October, making it apparently the second shortest time on the list. Most video Nasties aficionados do not care for the Frozen Scream. Once we start watching it, you'll see why. But I think that maybe if we take a closer look at this, we actually may fall prey to some of its subtle charms. This movie's had a pretty rough release history. It was on VHS in the US and the UK, and both of which looked, kind of shitty, as you can imagine. I think there was a Laserdisc at one point, and a rather ratty DVD, which looked a lot like the VHS tape. So there really were no decent viewing options for this until Vinegar Syndrome's new disc, which is paired with another Renee Harmon movie, The Executioner 2. Frozen Scream is actually taken from the original 16mm negative, amazingly enough. And naturally I had to celebrate by selecting it as the movie we're going to be watching this episode. Now, before we get started, one last thing. Unlike the Crontendo series, I'm not really doing these in any particular order, so feel free to make suggestions or requests in the comments for anything that was on the DPP list or on the Section 3 list. If there is something in particular you really want to see, go ahead and make a recommendation. The movie opens with Renee Harmon superimposed over the ocean and moon as narration sets down the movie's main theme. Namely, is immortality really that great, or would it suck?
Immortality? Why would anyone want to live forever in a world like this?
The disjointed nature of Frozen Scream is one thing that turns people off. We immediately go from this to a point-of-view shot of a poolside frolicking couple. They quickly get killed by a hooded maniac. And if you've ever seen Don't Go Into the Woods, you'll immediately recognize this music. We then cut to a daytime shot. Is he carrying the lady who just got killed? These look like different people, and this is clearly broad daylight, and he's carrying the body out in the open while there are people on bicycles just passing by. We now see Renee Harmon's yet unnamed character silently implanting some device into a dead lady's neck. We then are introduced to the female lead, Anne, played by one Lynn Kokol. Her husband is played by Wolf Mooser, who would later become a busy TV actor, taking small roles in everything from Matlock to Parks and Recreation to Breaking Bad.
Hello, this is Dr. Gerard again. Is Father O'Brien back from church yet? Any minute? Yes, please.
It's quite obvious something is wrong as Wolf calls his priest and the cops and gets a sinister phone call himself.
Father O'Brien, thank God. I can't hold off any longer. It's happening tonight and... Hello? Who is this?
Fear no longer, Tom. The angels will be there in a few minutes. Please be ready for this.
And then once again, murderous characters in cultist robes appear. Is Tom caught up in a satanic cult?
Judgment Day. Time to pay your dues.
His attackers turn out to be bulletproof, and they quickly inject him with a hypodermic needle, which looks kinda real, almost.
This'll only take a second, Tom.
I love the fact that these killer maniacs just waste this dude and are dragging away the body, but then when they hear that his wife is home, they turn and just go flying, running out the door. Then there is an immediate jump cut to some unspecified time in the future where Anne is recovering in, I guess, a hospital. Her nurse or doctor is rather ominously Renee Harmon. Now the narrative gets a bit confusing here.
You still refuse to believe me, don't you? After I found Tom dead, 2 men grabbed me and knocked me out with a drug. The same 2 men murdered Tom.
Anne claims that her husband killers, last seen fleeing the house, also injected her with a drug. So did they turn around and then attack her? Later in the movie it stated she saw them fleeing the house, so there may have been some script problems with this movie.
I know it.
Actually, I think the entire plot of this movie is nothing but a series of script problems. So far, pretty standard low-budget horror movie stuff, and then this happens.
And I know I didn't make it up.
My name's Sergeant McGuire. I'm a cop. And I was getting nowhere investigating...
Yes, the voiceover. Out of nowhere, a voiceover just happens. Apparently, the narrator is a police officer investigating the disappearance of some students. The thing is, the voiceover is laid directly over scenes that were obviously shot without the intention of a voiceover being put over them later. It's actually laid right down over existing dialogue scenes. You can actually hear the people talking, but the narrator is sort of drowning them out. At one point, he's even talking over his own character. In terms of sound mixing, this is really odd. I suppose this was a decision made in post-production, perhaps to help audiences better understand who this character is. We do learn that he was previously engaged to Anne, but she suddenly broke it off to marry the other guy at the last minute. And furthermore, he hopes to use the investigation to shack up with Anne again. We also learn that Renee Harmon's character, Lil Stanhope, is conspiring with some other doctor, and that they're up to something devious and sexy.
I could stay with her for a while.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm too fond of your company in my bedroom.
Sometimes I really don't know what I see in you, Sven. You remind me too much of one of your cold, immortal creations.
This scene is supposed to take place on a hospital grounds, but it looks like it was filmed in a rundown motel. A lot of the locations in this movie are a little odd. At this point, the film mostly follows Anne as she returns home from the hospital along with an icy, robotic student of Dr. Stanhope's that has been sent to act as sort of a live-in caretaker/spy. Mysterious things happen, and she and Detective McGuire engage in some very low-key investigation work. Now, unlike Last House on the Left or The Burning, there's not really that much known about the making of Frozen Scream. I mean, you really wouldn't want to advertise the fact that you were involved with this movie. But we can piece together some bits of info on this. Frozen Scream is the brainchild of Renee Harmon, its producer, star, and co-writer. She was born in Mannheim, Germany, and her friend and collaborator, James Bryan, who directed the video nasty Don't Go Into the Woods, straight up refers to her as a war bride. She and her husband, a U.S. Army colonel, moved to El Paso, where she sort of went into full-board housewife mode, and formed a theater troupe with the other Army wives. Eventually, her husband left the Army and got a job with Sunkist and moved to the L.A. area. She then started appearing in various oddball movies, like exploitation movies such as Al Adamson's Cinderella 2000.
Lord knows, I don't really need any. Just as soon trade you in on a well-built, male-type robot.
And Crown's classic Van Nuys Boulevard.
Harmon! Camille!
Camille?
She ended up teaching acting, of all things, at a local college. At some point, she made the decision to transition from actor to filmmaker, with Frozen Scream being her first attempt. Now, this was very much a product of the college where Harmon was teaching. It was apparently funded by her acting students. They would contribute money to the film and also be cast in it. According to James Bryan, she raised about $20,000. It was shot very cheaply on 16mm. The director, Frank Roach, was apparently a fellow acting teacher at her college, who only made one other movie after this, a Mad Maxy revenge flick called Nomad Riders. Frozen Scream was filmed probably right around the same time that James Bryan was making Don't Go Into the Woods, though the exact date is not known. Several online sources give a date of 1975. The Vinegar Syndrome DVD dates it to 1980, which sounds much more realistic. Don't Go Into the Woods was released in 1981, by the way. Both films use the same music from H. Kingsley Thurber. Now, Crontendo fans may be surprised to learn that Thurber later went on to make video game music, such as soundtracks to games like Captain Novolin and Rex Ronan Experimental Surgeon, as well as more mainstream stuff like NCAA basketball and Roger Clemens MVP baseball. One odd title is Dirt Tracks FX, a collaboration with Mark Gatiss, who later went on to become, went on to the big time as the sound director for the Call of Duty series. Thurber was also somehow involved in the music for the Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat. Harmon and Bryan went on to collaborate in several films. Harmon produced and starred in 1984's Executioner 2, a pretty amazing movie in its own right, which is on the same disc as Frozen Scream. This movie was financed by Italians and was titled so that it seemed to be a sequel to an old George Peppard movie called The Executioner. Other films include the infamous Lady Street Fighter, an utterly insane movie involving mobsters, hitmen, the FBI, which stars Harmon as some sort of super sexy martial arts expert / spy. Among other things, it has lengthy scenes of Harmon filleting celery, car chases, an orgy, and Harmon kicking a lot of ass. It wasn't released until years after it was shot, and some sources say it predates Frozen Scream, but yet it looks much more slickly made.
Some say he's into heavier stuff.
Her filmmaking career ended in the mid to late 80s with such zero-budget movies as Escape from an Insane Asylum, aka Night of Terror, which still employs familiar subjects for her, like hooded and or masked killers, and a party scene in which a band performs. At some point, Harmon relocated to Visalia, unfortunately for her, since it is among the worst cities in California. She continued to teach college and wrote quite a few books on filmmaking. One such book, The Beginning Filmmaker's Guide to a Successful First Film, gives her name as Renee Harmon, Ph.D., so she must have obtained a doctorate at some point. Now, you might laugh and say, how is the lady who made Frozen Scream going to tell people how they should be making a movie? And I understand your suspicion about this, but the bottom line is she made several movies, found financing, got distribution, both in the US and overseas. The movies got released on VHS and then later on DVD, and the bottom line is in 2016 you can easily buy a copy of Lady Street Fighter or Executioner 2 in the US, but you can't buy a copy of Orson Welles' Chimes Before Midnight. So in some sense, she was a successful filmmaker in that she knew how to get her movies made. Not that Frozen Scream is any kind of masterpiece. It does make a lot of very odd filmmaking choices. Some work quite well, such as Anne's surreal dream on the beach.
I love you, Anne, forever and ever.
And I guess this is the titular scream.
Halloween night. The beach, Zaza Brian, Tom. They were having a celebration. Cass convinced
And a minute later, Anne has a flashback to a beach party thrown by the Mad Doctors for their class. Though this seems to have been filmed at Stony Point in Chatsworth, outside of San Bernardino. Aside from Anne and her husband, the local priest is invited as some kind of very lame guest lecturer.
Which is the symbol of the immortal Christ. And with this in mind, I'd like you all to join hands.
He mumbles some nonsense, and the students then join hands around the fire and chant love and immortality for about 20 minutes.
Grant us now our humble...
Eventually, a lady takes off her shirt, and in a rarely seen technique, we actually cut out of the flashback into what I guess is the present day where another bloody murder occurs. And this is pretty damn weird because you think the beach flashback is over, and then suddenly it picks up where it left off. And then eventually Anne snaps out of the flashback and we're back in the car.
Sven and I are just loaded with work.
Another rather odd phantasmagorical sequence occurs as Dr. Stanhope has, again, a flashback or maybe a hallucination, I'm not sure, where she slits her wrists, and then Detective McGuire's voiceover comes back in.
Love? If you ask me about love, I'd say it's a lot like life. When it's over, it's over. I've never been one to sulk or go soft.
I was never really sure what kind of doctor Stanhope is. I mean, she's first seen at a hospital doing routine nursing work like handing out medication. So we guess she's a medical doctor, but she also teaches at a university, so the classes seem to involve her writing stuff like Thanatos on a blackboard and explaining how immortality is possible.
The Greek letter theta stands for Thanatos, the word for death. The bar above it cancels its meaning. Potentially, each one of us is our Thanatos, immortal.
But she seems to be a psychologist, as Anne has therapy appointments or something with her. And at one point, Anne even asks her to analyze a dream she has in the car scene. And yet she's also doing experimental biomedical work on human corpses, which involves inserting electronic devices into their brains to bring them back to life.
She may have triggered a malfunction in her prefrontal circuitry.
Then we attend to that. Then what? Will she be as unstable as before? Will she end?
So I guess she's one of those sort of general-purpose movie scientists, I suppose. We get all these repeated references to coldness and immortality. It sort of happens over and over again. Every single damn time Harmon's character appears, she suddenly goes on and on about immortality. So during their investigation, Anne and McGuire speak to the priest, whom her husband had recently spoken to before he died. It turns out he was involved with the other two doctors in an experiment on reviving dead rats at low temperatures.
The thing that seemed to upset Tom most was that when the rats recovered, their personalities were altered, diffused, almost soulless. If they were human, one could almost say that they were without souls.
The poor priest gets immediately killed in a confessional booth. In one creepy scene, Anne gets a phone call from her supposedly dead husband.
Hello?
Anne, I'm cold. Help me, I'm so cold.
Who is this? I'll call the police.
Anne, my body is so cold. Numb. Help me.
At some point, the guys in robes break into Anne's house and threaten her. Naturally, her live-in nurse didn't see a thing, or at least she didn't see a soul.
I was in the kitchen. Then I heard you scream.
Did you see anyone else in the house?
Not a soul. What's wrong?
Your hand. It was cold as ice.
The last third or so of the movie focuses on Anne McGuire's attempt to look for clues in the doctor's house during a Halloween party. And the party is, quite frankly, hilarious. I love this band that's providing the entertainment. A piano features quite prominently on the song, yet there is clearly no keyboard player in the band. And they're also playing 50s rock songs with these nonsensically altered lyrics. What are they saying? Going to jack around the shack tonight? And wait a second, Halloween party, didn't the whole beach ritual thing take place on Halloween? So does this take place exactly 1 year after the beach party, or did everything in the movie, including the flashback, take place over the course of a few days? It's really hard to tell. The party scene goes on for a pretty darn long time in an effort to stretch out the running time, reminding us this was really an amateur film. Now here's something interesting. One of the reviewers on IMDb says he actually worked on the movie as a grip or best boy and describes the shoot as being pretty chaotic. There were no permits, location shooting was often done without toilets or even toilet paper, Harmon's mother was originally providing the meals but she got sick, and the cast and crew lived off hot dogs for the rest of the shoot. At one point, Harmon got in an argument with the director, Frank Roach, and he left. And supposedly none of the crew ever got paid. So if the movie seems a bit discombobulated, you can understand these are people who probably didn't really know that much about making movies. We learn that the revived corpses need to be kept cold, and when one gets too hot while dancing, she collapses. Anne uses this diversion to sneak into the secret lab and overhears that she is to be killed shortly. I'm still not quite sure why they just didn't kill her to begin with, but apparently they had their reasons. It's implied that the revived corpses have no souls, but they retain their human intelligence and thus become completely amoral monsters. Anne sees her husband inside a nearby house, looking out the window.
Ooh, you frightened me.
And upon investigating, finds a few of the reanimated persons who are kept in cold storage. Despite its ratty production values and borderline incoherence, I sort of like Frozen Scream. If this had been a slicker film, it would have sort of lost its surreal and dreamlike charm. When you see a movie like Frozen Scream or The Child, another oddball movie that ended up on the Section 3 list, they feel like personal projects. They have an almost handcrafted feel to them. By comparison, low-budget Italian movies like those of Joe D'Amato or someone often have this cynical quality to them. It's like they're trying to fool the audience into believing they're going to see a better movie than it really is, what with all those fake sequels they produced in Italy. When you see a movie like Frozen Scream, you really have no idea what you're going to get. A common reaction upon seeing Frozen Scream is, what the hell am I watching?
Are you okay?
I think so.
I'm sorry. All of a sudden you were in the middle of the road. Yeah. Let's get you to the hospital, okay?
The way everything just doesn't feel quite right. Harmon's impenetrable accent, the strange editing, the bizarre voiceover, the fucked up electronic cues, the inane dialogue. I mean, just listen to this guy.
Someone's after me.
Yeah, witches and goblins.
There's someone outside trying to kill me.
Who's up there?
And all of this is made just to feel a bit more unreal due to the dialogue being dubbed in afterwards. Now, I'll admit there were far better regional and independent US horror movies. This isn't as good as, say, 200 Maniacs, or Lamora, A Child's Tale of the Supernatural, or Blood-Sucking Freaks, or even some of the oddball regional slasher movies from the 80s, like Just Before Dawn or Nail Gun Massacre. It's not even as good as Don't Go Into the Woods, but as a matter of fact, I do like Frozen Scream. The movie ends with Anne's assailant being told by Dr. Stanhope that he's getting too hot, which causes him to collapse.
It's hot in here. Your usefulness is over. Immortals live in the cool of the clouds, but you are burning.
Dr. Johnson says he's going to kill Anne and then revive her. We get a little bit of last-minute exposition here, in which Johnson explains the revival process and tells Anne how her husband had agreed to the procedure being done on him, but tried to back out at the last moment, which of course led to him being murdered and then revived. Stanhope, who seems to legitimately like Anne, decides her colleague has gone too far, shoots him, and then wants Anne to help her continue the work of turning people into frozen zombies. Anne flips some switches and blows up the lab a bit, and now Stanhope really does want to kill her.
You'll feel a little cold for a while, but no pain, I promise.
I thought I heard a disturbance.
Father O'Brien, stop her. She's trying to kill me. Please, Father, help me.
Of course I'll help you.
Frozen Scream ends in an unexpectedly gruesome way as Stanhope and her zombies visit McGuire in the hospital. He had been hit by a car at some point, and he's somehow still narrating the voiceover in the past tense.
Could Dr. Johnson have been onto something? Would living as a frozen zombie forever be any better than facing the pain of things coming to an end?
Love and immortality.
Love.
It's not really clear why Frozen Scream ended up on the Nasties list. It's not very gory, and the ending here is the really only disturbing part.
Immortality.
It's kind of funny how, like, just 5 minutes ago, you know, she was all going on about how the procedure won't cause any pain and so on, no one will be suffering. and I love this incredibly slow-moving credit scroll. So hopefully I've led some of you to appreciate one of the most overlooked and misunderstood movies on the Nasties list. And like I said in the introduction, I have nothing specifically planned for next time, so feel free to leave suggestions in the comments. Once again, thanks for watching.